Welcome to our lecture on structure and superstructure. The production of ideas, of conceptions, of consciousness is at first directly interwoven with the material activity and the material intercourse of men, the language of real life. Second quote, setting out from real active men and on the basis of their real life process, demonstrating the development of the ideological reflexes and echoes of this life process. And third, in general, people cannot be liberated as long as they are unable to obtain food and drink, housing and clothing in adequate quality and quantity. Now, structure. We find in the book German Ideology by Marx and Engels in part 1 a first reference to the social organization evolving directly out of production and commerce, which in all ages forms the basis of the state and of the rest of the idealistic superstructure. So here we have to notice the structure base, which is the production and commerce, so the economic base, affects the social organization, and it is the base of state and superstructure. Please notice this, that in this quote we have in all ages. There's a relation between the economical base and the superstructure can be found any time in the history of humanity. This is important. Now, let's look at the base superstructure. Most of the time, the metaphor base superstructure or structure superstructure is used to explain the relationship between three general levels of society, whereby the two levels of the superstructure are determined by the base. This means that the superstructure is not autonomous, that it does not emerge out of itself, but has a foundation in the social relations of production. Consequently, any particular set of economic relations determines the existence of specific forms of state and social consciousness, which are adequate to its functioning, and any change in the economic foundation of a society leads to a transformation of the superstructure. As you see, I have pointed out the main structure, superstructure. The superstructure is not autonomous. It has a foundation in the social relations of production, in consequences that a particular economic phase is at the source of particular state and social individual consciousness development. Now, historical materialism. The structure-superstructure concept becomes thereafter part of a science, which is called historical materialism. It can be described as the theory of social formations and their history. So the word here is social formations, okay, and their history. Now, this science uses mainly the following concepts: the forces and the relations of production, determination by the economy. As you've seen, there is a base, economical base, which affects the production of ideas, concepts, institutions, apparatus, superstructure, no? State ideology. Now, on this thesis, of course, there is some kind of deviation that could be developed, and they were developed. In fact, by stressing importance of one of the two elements, interpreters of Marx have deviated toward or the economism or the historicism. The economism, in which the elements of the superstructure are seen as but passive effects of the economic basis pervasive determinism. And two, historicism, which assimilates all practices within a common historical present. Then it relativizes knowledge, deprives science of its autonomy, and treats Marxism itself not as an objective science, but as the self-expression of the contemporary world, class consciousness, or viewpoint of the proletariat. The character of the relationship between base and superstructure is actually more complicated than it appears from these two formulations, and naturally it would require a course on its own to be treated properly. Okay? But let's see how we can oppose these deviations. So, first of all, we could be alerted by reductionism. So we could say against an attempt to reduction of the aim and the foundation of this economy. The determination by the base does not reduce politics and ideas to economic phenomena. This aspect has been rendered as the relative autonomy of the superstructure. To avoid the risk of economic reductionism, the superstructure of ideas is not conceived as a mere passive reflection, but it is capable of some effectivity. So we give not an automatic production of superstructure by the economy. Engels, which is one of the main authors and the father of Marxism, and we've seen that in the previous lessons, Engels moves away from the idea of mechanical causality, whereby one level, the economy, is supposed to be the cause, and the other levels, the superstructure, its effects. So he moves away from this mechanical causality. So one is directly cause of the other. He introduces a dialectical idea of causality, whereby the ultimately determining factor does not exclude determination by the superstructures, which as a secondary causes can produce effects and react upon the base. On one hand, the superstructure of ideas can be treated as a secondary phenomenon, a mere reflection whose reality is ultimately to be found in the production relations. A conscious, therefore, is emptied of its specific content and significance, and it is reduced to economic relations. So we want to avoid that, and the Engels also act against this danger. Okay? But there is an example of a Russian Marxist, Plechenov, who elaborated a structure in 5 levels, which are the following. So to avoid this mechanical, simplistic relation between the base and superstructure. So the 5 levels are, as we see, the state of the productive forces, the economic relations these forces condition, the social political system that has developed on the given economic basis, the mentality of men living in society, which is determined in part directly by the economic conditions obtaining, and in part by the entire social political system that has arisen on that foundation. And 5, the various ideologies that reflect the properties of that mentality. So as you see, there is a much more detailed level of these relations. So, as a conclusion for this lecture, we can say the metaphor-based superstructure helps describe the development of various institutions of specific field of practice like economic, political, and intellectuals, and of the specialized apparatuses on top of them. So, but apparently for some critics, if we understand this metaphor structure superstructure as a static image of the society, we will be less able to explain the determination of politics and social consciousness. Once again, we should not be victim of a form of reductionism by eliminating, which would consist in the elimination of the dynamic aspects of a class struggle or practice, which involves that one specific level be separated from others. This would be the reductionism, right? In that case, we would fall, then, in the mistake of determining the superstructure by an external agent, the base superstructure, the base structure. So, please, review this. It's full of concepts, but we have already treated this in previous lessons, many of them. So you should be able to listen again with more understanding and focus on certain aspects, and this should give you a more in-depth idea of what we mean by historical materialism and how we can understand the society in two levels interwoven in which condition each other. Okay? Thank you. Till the next time, have a nice day.